Mobile Suit Gundam, created by Hajime Yatate and Yoshiyuki Tomino, the original series premiered on April 7, 1979, and ran through January 26, 1980, delivering a story that introduced something the medium had never seen. The premise was deceptively simple: a conflict between space colonies and Earth, fought by giant humanoid vehicles called mobile suits, with the story told from the perspective of the teenagers caught inside it. 43 episodes built the entire template from scratch. Every convention that fans now associate with Gundam, from the white-suited everyman pilot to the enigmatic masked rival, was invented within this single run. No predecessor existed to guide it. No franchise blueprint. Yoshiyuki Tomino directed the whole thing, and the sheer density of invention across those 43 episodes is what makes the series feel so remarkably self-contained. That is the contradiction worth sitting with. A show with no blueprint managed to produce the blueprint every science fiction series that followed would chase for decades. And before you write it off as just the first in a long line of sequels, consider the specific. Mobile Suit Gundam aired between April 1979 and January 1980, a single continuous run, conceived and executed as one complete story before the word franchise even applied. The series that came after it, every single sequel, spin-off, and alternate timeline entry, all trace their DNA back to these 43 episodes. That's the image to hold. 1 year of television, and a creative team that didn't know they were inventing a genre, inventing it anyway. Subscribe and tell us in the comments which Gundam TV series you think was the most influential. Let's get back into it. Mobile Suit Gundam Zeta. Where the original was remote history by 1985, Zeta was already demanding a sequel that Yoshiyuki Tomino himself would create and direct. Mobile Suit Zeta Gundam is a 1985 Japanese anime television series, the second installment in the Gundam franchise and a direct sequel to the 1979 Mobile Suit Gundam, written and directed by Yoshiyuki Tomino. The shift in proximity is immediate and structural. Where the original series was a self-contained story, Zeta was a continuation set 8 years later in the same universe, following the same Earth Federation, but operating with none of the original's cautious optimism. The Grips conflict pits the Federation's elite Titans unit against the rebel group AGE, and the series tracks that civil war with a moral complexity the original only hinted at. Tomino's hand is everywhere: the heavier political machinery, the characters who die because of their political positions rather than their combat skills, the way the series treats victory as something that destroys the victors as thoroughly as the defeated. This was 1985, 6 years after the original ended, and Tomino returned to prove that the world he built in 43 episodes could sustain a darker, more complicated story without losing what made it compelling. That commitment to escalation within the same continuity is what makes Zeta feel like a direct conversation with its predecessor, rather than a new show using an old brand. The implication the facts force is plain. The Universal Century timeline works precisely because it is a single continuous narrative, and Zeta is the proof that the original's world was built to hold more story than one series could contain. Mobile Suit Gundam ZZ. Mobile Suit Gundam ZZ is the third installment in Sunrise's long-running Gundam franchise, the last TV series in the Gundam franchise released in Japan's Showa period, and a direct follow-up to Mobile Suit Zeta Gundam, picking up directly after its events. Created by Hajime Yatate at concept and Yoshiyuki Tomino at story, with Tomino serving as chief director, ZZ inherited the darkest ending in franchise history, and immediately did something unexpected. It got lighter. The tonal shift is deliberate and stark. Where Zeta had earned its reputation for unflinching gravity, ZZ opened with episodic comedy, as though the series had deliberately inverted the rules Zeta had established. That inversion is the point. If Zeta proved the Universal Century could sustain escalating darkness, ZZ proved it could abandon that darkness entirely without collapsing. Mobile Suit Gundam ZZ demonstrates that each Gundam series operates within its own continuity, following its own rules rather than inheriting obligations from what came before. The franchise's defining structural feature is not continuity. It is the freedom each series grants itself to be whatever it decides to be, regardless of tonal expectations set by prior entries. That is what ZZ reveals about the category as a whole. Mobile Suit Victory Gundam. After ZZ swung the Universal Century toward comedy, Victory Gundam swung it back the other way, harder than any entry before it. The fourth Universal Century TV series, and the last of Tomino's original Showa into Heisei run. It aired 51 episodes on TV Asahi and its ANN affiliate stations from April 2, 1993 to March 25, 1994, close enough to reach a living audience, not distant enough to be nostalgia. It exists in the Universal Century timeline as a mainline entry, which means its violence was not optional. The series arrived without the protective framing that later entries would use. No virtual layer, no game logic, no alternate universe justification. Every death was final, every child-soldier situation was explicit, and the machinery of war consumed characters without ceremony or narrative rescue. The show's structure made no accommodation for viewers who wanted comfort. Atrocities accumulated episode after episode across the full 51-episode run, and the broadcast continued regardless of audience reaction, because the war it depicted continued regardless of anyone's feelings about it. Children died in combat and were replaced by other children. Families were destroyed and the series did not pause to mourn them. The violence was not atmospheric or stylized, it was persistent, cumulative, and entirely without narrative relief. Mobile Fighter G Gundam. What looked like a safe bet turned out to be the franchise's most deliberate departure from everything that had defined it up to that point. The entries before it had stayed locked inside the Universal Century's grinding war. G Gundam made a conscious decision to stop pretending it belonged in that conversation at all. Mobile Fighter G Gundam is a 1994 Japanese animated television series produced by Sunrise and the fifth installment in the long-running Gundam franchise, running 49 episodes on Japan's TV Asahi from April 22, 1994 to March 31, 1995. The precision of those dates alone tells you this was a calculated production, not a passion project thrown together by people who loved the franchise too much, but a piece of corporate product timed for a specific season and a specific slot. The episode count of 49 matched the standard broadcast year, slotting cleanly into a year-long run on the same network that had carried its predecessors, from the same studio, as part of the same overarching brand. Whatever it was trying to be, it was trying to be it on purpose. And that specificity is the whole point, because the alternative to intentionality is randomness, and nothing about a 49-episode order placed at a precise spring premiere date on a major network looks random. The design wasn't accidental. It was built for a particular audience that didn't need what the previous series had been offering, and it delivered exactly that. Mobile Suit Gundam Wing. Whatever was merely unusual about the previous series becomes overwhelming here. The premiere on April 7, 1995 landed barely a week after G Gundam had aired its final episode on March 31, 1995. Which means the franchise had cycled through an entire series in the time it took to put this one together. Mobile Suit Gundam Wing ran a full year from April 7, 1995 to March 29, 1996 on TV Asahi's ANN network, and its production architecture makes the ambition clear. Yoshiyuki Tomino's creator credit kept the institutional credibility, while Katsuyuki Sumizawa's development handed the storytelling to someone building something with a different shape in mind. The direction swap at episode 27, where Shinji Takamatsu took over through episode 49, suggests the second half was handled by different instincts than the first. Kao Otani's score brought a composer whose range extended well beyond anime, and a four-person producing team, Yoshiaki Koizumi, Masuo Ueda, and Hideyuki Tomioka, under TV Asahi and Sunrise, kept the logistics coherent across a full year of weekly episodes. The five principal voice actors carrying the full 49-episode run, Hikaru Midorikawa, Toshihiko Seki, Shigeru Nakahara, Ai Orikasa, and Ryuzo Ishino, means the core cast barely shifted, and three of them covered the five Gundam pilots, which means the story was designed around a rotating group of leads, rather than a single protagonist holding every episode together. The problem researchers keep running into is how to account for what this series actually did to the franchise's global reach, because every conventional explanation runs into the same wall. The standard model of how an anime builds a loyal audience requires it to establish its world early, give viewers time to settle in, and create investment in the setting before the action escalates. None of that happened here in the way the model predicts. After War Gundam X. The After War Gundam X is a 1996 Japanese anime television series and the seventh installment in the long-running Gundam franchise that started in 1979. A sequel manga titled After War Gundam X, Under the Moonlight ran in Gundam Ace from October 26, 2004 to September 26, 2006, collected in 4 volumes. The series takes place in an alternate timeline called After War, AW, and runs 39 episodes. That 39-episode run, shorter than both preceding entries, reflects a story told at a different pace. Fewer episodes, tighter through line, no room for the side adventures that padded longer series. The sequel mangas run in Gundam Ace magazine, launched 8 years after the anime finished and collected across 4 volumes, signals that the world kept generating material for audiences who wanted to stay in it beyond the broadcast's end. The direct implication is that a person living in after-war year 0015, 15 years after the catastrophe that defines this timeline, has never known anything except the aftermath. They have no reference point for what the world looked like before, no baseline for normalcy, and no inherited framework for understanding the conflict that destroyed it. The surface-level reading is that this is simply a darker take on the Gundam formula, a franchise entry that decided post-apocalyptic settings were interesting. But the pattern that holds across the alternate timeline, the deliberate separation from prior continuity, and the fact that the story's central premise is a war that already ended, suggests something else. The franchise had been depicting endless war for 17 years at this point, and Gundam X was the first entry willing to show what the logical terminus of that cycle actually looks like. The Universal Century's perpetual conflict had always been treated as a given. Gundam X simply collapsed the timeline and showed the wreckage. Turn A Gundam. Turn A Gundam arrived in 1999 as the 8th installment and the franchise's 20th anniversary centerpiece, and it wasn't just a new Gundam series. It was a completely different kind of project wearing the Gundam name. Created by franchise founder Yoshiyuki Tomino himself, it aired on Fuji Television from April 9, 1999 through April 14, 2000, spanning 50 episodes including a mid-series recap special, with a score composed by Yoko Kanno and production overseen by Hideyuki Tomioka and Yoshihiro Suzuki. 2 compilation films, Turn A Gundam I, Earthlight at 129 minutes, and Turn A Gundam 2, Moonlight Butterfly at 127 minutes, hit theaters in February 2002, but none of those production credits explain what Turn A actually is. Set in the correct century timeline, it takes place not in a distant future or an alternate universe, but on an Earth buried under thousands of years of accumulated civilization, where the Turn A Gundam itself is a millennia-old weapon, unearthed from the lunar surface, carrying the visual DNA of every Gundam design across the franchise's 2-decade history, fused into a single, absurdly over-equipped silhouette. And then it gets stranger. The Turn A Gundam's signature weapon, the Moonlight Butterfly, releases nanomachine clouds that can regress an entire continent's technology back to the Stone Age in hours. The machine isn't just a mobile suit, it's a civilization reset button. Critics pushed back hard. They called Turn A Gundam a patchwork of recycled designs stitched together for anniversary nostalgia, and they weren't wrong about the design lineage. But you don't bury that level of intertextual weight inside a series by accident. Turn A Gundam wasn't trying to be another Gundam entry. It was trying to be the last word on what a Gundam could be, and it said it by deliberately becoming every Gundam all at once. Mobile Suit Gundam Seed. Whereas Turn A Gundam tried to close the franchise's book, Mobile Suit Gundam Seed arrived in 2002 as its 9th installment and reopened it entirely, directed by Mitsuo Fukuda. The series recreated the original 1979 Mobile Suit Gundam's core conflict, space colonists rebelling against an oppressive Earth government, but transplanted it into the entirely new cosmic-era timeline, with 2002 production values that didn't exist when the original launched. 50 episodes aired and Seed became one of the franchise's most popular entries. It didn't just expand the fanbase, it nearly doubled it overnight, reintroducing Gundam to a generation that had never watched the Universal Century, and proving the original's premise was durable enough to carry an entirely new continuity built for a modern audience. Mobile Suit Gundam Seed Destiny, set in Cosmic Era 73, 2 years after the original Seed ended, Seed Destiny arrived as its direct sequel and the franchise's 10th installment, retaining director Mitsuo Fukuda and most of the original staff across 50 episodes. The new protagonist, Shin Asuka, was pushed into a war that structurally mirrored the original's Zaft versus Earth Alliance conflict, but his decisions alienated the audience the original Seed had spent 50 episodes building goodwill with, so much so that the series ultimately pivoted its focus back towards Seed's returning leads, a mid-run course correction that told you exactly how hard the new protagonist had failed to hold the room. Mobile Suit Gundam 00. What started with one show soon became the franchise's most structurally ambitious expansion up to that point, covering 50 episodes across 2 broadcast seasons, and then pushing further into film and OVA. The first season ran 25 episodes from October 5, 2007 to March 29, 2008. The second season matched that count exactly, premiering October 5, 2008 and closing March 29, 2009, doubling the footprint in a single calendar cycle. Between those two seasons and after the second, a film sequel titled Mobile Suit Gundam ZZ the Movie, Awakening of the Trailblazer premiered in Japan on September 18, 2010, carrying the narrative past both broadcast windows. And in the space between the second season and that film, an OVA titled Mobile Suit Gundam ZZ Special Edition ran 3 episodes from October 27, 2009 to February 23, 2010, compressing and re-editing the television story for home release. 50 episodes, 2 seasons, 1 film, 3 OVA installments, all across a broadcast window that spanned from October 2007 through September 2010. Mobile Suit Gundam AGE. Where ZZ expanded outward, this 12th installment looked inward at structure and authorship. A 2011 series announced in the July 2011 issue of Shogakukan's Koro Koro comic, which simultaneously revealed early visuals and confirmed that Level 5 President Akihiro Hino would be in charge of the story. The series was created by Hajime Yatate and Yoshiyuki Tomino, developed by Akihiro Hino, and directed by Susumu Yamaguchi. An original video animation titled Mobile Suit Gundam AGE, Memory of Eden, arrived later, released on July 26, 2013, with a runtime of 150 minutes, extending the narrative beyond the television series' conclusion. That the franchise could sustain this kind of output consistently, a broadcast run, an OVA spanning more than 2 hours, years of supplementary material, each with a director and developer named, is the real story. The production infrastructure was running as a system with interchangeable but always filled roles, not as a series of one-off productions, and Tomino's creation credit anchoring every entry ensured that continuity was preserved even as the day-to-day creative personnel changed. Gundam Build Fighters. The franchise's first major entry in this stretch to operate outside the mainline continuity, the series carved out its own separate timeline and premise, Gunpla, Plastic Model Combat, which meant nothing that came before it needed to be acknowledged and nothing after it had to honor its rules. What it did not lack was franchise infrastructure. A sequel series titled Gundam Build Fighters Tri followed, and an original net animation titled Gundam Build Fighters Batlog ran from August 4th to December 8th, 2017, with 5 episodes of 11 minutes each. The series was directed by Kenji Nagasaki with screenplay by Yosuke Kuroda, both returning for the sequel series and the later Build Fighters ANE entries, keeping the entire Build Fighters output coherent through personnel rather than continuity. What the format shift reveals is that the franchise can generate a self-contained fictional universe about fictional model combat, spin it into its own sequel and supplementary content, and keep all of it unified through consistent creative leadership. The system works whether the stories share a timeline or not. Gundam Reconista in G, the franchise Tomino founded in 1979, shaped through Mobile Suit Zeta Gundam in 1985 and Mobile Suit Victory Gundam in 1993, returned in 2014 with the first Gundam TV series he wrote and directed since Turn A Gundam. Gundam Reconquista in G is a 2014 Japanese science fiction anime television series and the 13th installment in Sunrise's long-running Gundam franchise, created for the Gundam 35th anniversary celebration, with Yoshiyuki Tomino as chief director and screenwriter. The same creator who built the franchise, directed its most divisive entry, then returned to answer for it. On paper that reads like the franchise's endpoint, a world that actually solved the problems the original 1979 show raised, where space isn't a prison and Earth isn't a battlefield. The reasonable explanation is that an anniversary demands a grand gesture and the creator's return delivers it, that the rebuild century offered a clean slate and a way to revisit the franchise's core conflicts without retconning 40 years of continuity. But the evidence the boring explanation cannot hold is the setting itself, the rebuild century, year-part century, year 1014, a time period positioned as Earth's surface and orbital infrastructure operating under stable, organized control. This isn't a broken world. It's a functioning one. And that distinction is the whole point. What this proves about the category as a whole is that major franchise anniversary entries don't validate themselves by reconnecting to a shared continuity. They validate themselves by proving the franchise's ideas are strong enough to carry a completely new world on their own. Stability doesn't resolve the underlying conflict. It just changes what the conflict looks like. Gundam Build Fighters Tri. A 2014 Japanese science fiction anime television series based on Sunrise's long-running Gundam franchise, Tri announced itself differently than its predecessor ever did. Every detail describes a franchise operating with the confidence of a sport that already has a rulebook, a fan base, and a sequel greenlit before the first season finished airing. The tournament structure in Tri is more elaborate than anything the original series attempted, built around regional school teams, a ranking system that resets the cast standing at the start of every new arc, and Gunpla customization rules that become the story's mechanics rather than just its backdrop. When the spin-off TV film titled Gundam Build Fighters Tri: Island Wars was released on August 21, 2016, with a runtime of 36 minutes, it completed a multi-year arc that stretched across 2 television series and 1 film without ever abandoning its core premise. When someone asks what Gundam Build Fighters Tri is, the answer is a single sentence. It's what happens when a franchise figures out that a competitive sport has enough structure to generate sequels without needing the same cast or story to carry them. Mobile Suit Gundam Iron-Blooded Orphans. Mobile Suit Gundam Iron-Blooded Orphans is a 2015 Japanese mecha anime series and the 14th mainline entry in Sunrise's long-running Gundam franchise. It aired in Japan on MBS and other JNN stations from October 4, 2015 to March 27, 2016 for its first season. Then a second season premiered on October 2, 2016, broadcast on MBS and other JNN stations, which are major Japanese network affiliates, not a niche late-night slot, not a streaming exclusive, not a format that excuses tonal restraint. A 14-year-old child soldier, interplanetary transport as the central dispute, a story that ran in full on mainstream television without the premise being simplified for mass appeal. What's actually happening the whole time is that the Gundam franchise's core structural mechanism, a child thrust into a war that isn't his, forced to choose between survival and the only structure he's ever known, doesn't require space colonies, new types, or a post-disaster collapse to land. It requires a 14-year-old, an interplanetary transport dispute, and a broadcast network that will put it on air. The rest is just window dressing. Gundam Build Divers. The grimdark physicality of Mobile Suit Gundam, Iron-Blooded Orphans leaned on a single rule, that war is real, bodies break permanently, and consequences cannot be undone. Build Divers quietly proved that rule was never real to begin with. The show walked away from physical gunpla customization entirely, dropping its cast inside a full virtual reality massively multiplayer online game where mobile suit battles play out as rendered simulations. No models to build, no plastic to break, no paint to dry, just digital combat with no physical aftermath. The tangible craft that Build Fighters had insisted was the entire point. The cutting, sanding, painting, the hands-on relationship between builder and machine simply never existed here. Sunrise produced it for the TXN network, where it premiered on April 3, 2018, positioning the series as the spiritual successor to 2013's Gundam Build Fighters and the third series within the Gundam Build subseries. The contradiction between what Build Fighters had established, that the franchise's appeal lay in the hands-on craft of gunpla, and what Build Divers actually was, a game set entirely inside a computer, became the show's defining tension. A sequel was inevitable. The announcement came on November 21, 2018, with the follow-up series landing in October 2019. Gundam Build Divers Re-Rise. Where the previous series broke a rule about what a Gundam show could be, Re-Rise confirmed that rule had never actually existed, and escalated the stakes by making the abstraction explicitly personal, a shift in kind, not just degree. Sunrise Beyond produced the sequel as the 4th series within the Gundam Build subseries and released it in October 2019 to celebrate the franchise's 40th anniversary. The anniversary framing gave the project institutional weight, and the content inside that framing was doing something the original had not fully articulated. The original's virtual simulation had no permanent consequences. When a mobile suit disintegrated, it simply respawned. When a player lost, the damage reset. Nothing outside the game carried forward. Rise pushed relationships forged inside that simulation to carry the weight of real grief, and the question of where an avatar ended and its operator began stopped being a metaphor and started functioning as the central conflict. The franchise was asking its audience to care about a virtual world the way they would care about a physical one, then punishing them for doing so. The original had no stakes because nothing mattered. This one had real stakes because everything did. Rise raised the cost of attachment inside a system designed to reset everything, and left the line between player and avatar dissolved in a way the franchise had never attempted before. Mobile Suit Gundam, The Witch from Mercury. The previous two entries were versions of the Gundam Build sub-series' familiar formula: virtual reality, gunpla-adjacent mechanics, a self-aware game layer separating the viewer from the conflict. The Witch from Mercury is a different thing wearing the franchise's name. It is the 15th mainline entry in Sunrise's long-running Gundam franchise, and nothing about it gestures back to the Build timeline, the Universal Century, or any prior alternate universe. Directed by Hiroshi Kobayashi with scripts by Ichiro Okochi, the series aired from October 2, 2022 to July 2, 2023 across the JNN network. A prequel ONA titled Mobile Suit Gundam, The Witch from Mercury Prologue, had already established the setting on July 14, 2022, nearly 3 months before the main series began, an unusual move that bypassed the traditional premiere model entirely, so viewers already understood the world, its politics, and the Gundam aerial systems before Episode 1 opened. Corporate power structures, a space colonial setting, a forbidden mobile suit named the Gundam Aerial, and a young protagonist caught in machinery she did not build. None of it connects to the virtual reality experiments that surrounded it in the broadcast order. A young girl sits at the controls of the forbidden Gundam Aerial, looking out through the cockpit at a corporate empire built on the enslavement of her people.